Nikola Tesla, the visionary who dreamed of wireless worlds. Welcome to another journey in sleepy history and mysterietional. We are into quietly fascinating corners of history and science. Tonight, we're exploring the life and work of a man who saw the future with such clarity that it sometimes seemed like magic to those around him. Nikola Tesla was an inventor whose ideas were so far ahead of his time that some of them still haven't been fully realized more than 80 years after his death. His story takes us from a small village in what is now Croatia to the heights of scientific celebrity in New York City, and eventually to a lonely hotel room where he spent his final years, speaking to pigeons and dreaming of technologies that might have changed the world. This is a story about vision and isolation, about genius and the price it sometimes demands. It's about a man who helped create the modern electrical world we take for granted every time we flip a light switch, yet died in poverty and relative obscurity. Most importantly, it's a story about ideas that were perhaps too grand, too ambitious for the commercial and technological realities of their time. So settle in comfortably, and let's begin this exploration of one of history's most fascinating and enigmatic inventors. The Lightning Child, the story of Nikola Tesla, begins on a stormy night. According to family accounts, he was born just as midnight approached between July 9th and 10th in 1856 in the small village of Smiljan, located in what was then the Austrian Empire and is now part of Croatia. The birth is officially recorded as July 10th. Lightning flashed across the sky as his mother labored, and legend has it that the midwife declared this a bad omen, calling him a child of darkness. Tesla's mother, however, reportedly corrected her, saying he would be a child of light. Whether this story is entirely true or embellished over time, it carries a certain poetic resonance when you consider what Tesla would go on to accomplish with electricity and light. Tesla was born into a Serbian family with deep roots in education and the Orthodox Church. His father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, continuing a family tradition that stretched back generations. His grandfather had also been a priest, and there was an expectation that the male children in the family would follow this path into religious service or perhaps military careers. But Tesla's mother, Juka Mandic, possessed a different kind of mind altogether. Though she had no formal education and could not read or write, she had a remarkable gift for mechanical invention. Juka created small household devices in her spare time, clever tools and implements that made domestic work more efficient. She could memorize epic Serbian poetry, reciting thousands of lines perfectly, and she had an intuitive understanding of how things worked and how they might work better. Tesla would later credit his mother as the source of his inventive spirit and his ability to visualize complex mechanical systems in his mind before building them. From her, he inherited not just creativity, but also an extraordinary memory and the capacity for intense mental focus. The Tesla household was one of 5 children. Nikola had an older brother named Dane and 3 sisters, Milka, Angelina, and Marika. When Nikola was just 5 years old, tragedy struck the family. His older brother Dane, who was 12 and reportedly brilliant, died in a riding accident. The exact circumstances remain somewhat unclear in historical records, though some accounts suggest he was thrown from a horse. This loss profoundly affected young Nikola, who later described experiencing visions and intense hallucinations that began around this time. Some biographers have speculated that survivor's guilt or the trauma of losing his admired older brother may have contributed to certain psychological patterns that would follow Tesla throughout his life. As a child, Tesla displayed the kind of mind that teachers both appreciate and find challenging. He could perform integral calculus in his head and memorize entire books after reading them just once. He became fluent in multiple languages, eventually mastering Serbian, Czech, English, French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Latin. But alongside these gifts came peculiarities that would intensify as he aged. He experienced vivid mental images, so real that he sometimes had difficulty distinguishing them from physical reality. These weren't simple daydreams, but detailed, three-dimensional visualizations that he could manipulate and examine from every angle in his mind's eye. Tesla attended primary school in Smiljan and then moved to nearby Gospic for further education. He later attended the Higher Real Gymnasium in Karlovac, where he excelled particularly in mathematics and physics. His teachers noticed something unusual about his approach to problems. While other students needed to work through calculations on paper, Tesla could visualize the solutions, seeing the mathematical relationships and mechanical operations as clearly as if they were drawings before his eyes. When he finished his studies at the gymnasium in 1873, Tesla fell seriously ill with cholera. He was bedridden for 9 months and came very close to death on several occasions. During this illness, his father, who had hoped Nikola would enter the priesthood, made him a promise. If Nikola recovered, Milutin said, he would allow him to attend engineering school rather than entering religious life.
Tesla did recover, though he remained weakened, and his father kept his word. After recuperating, Tesla spent time hiding in the mountains to avoid being drafted into military service. He used this period to read extensively and to strengthen both his body and mind through long walks in nature. In 1875, he enrolled at the Austrian Polytechnic in Graz on a military scholarship. Here, his exceptional abilities became even more apparent. He studied for up to 20 hours a day, mastering subjects with remarkable speed and depth. However, he also developed some habits that would cause problems later: gambling and an inability to moderate his own intensity. At Graz, Tesla became fascinated by a demonstration of a Gram dynamo, an early electrical generator that could also function as a motor when reversed. The professor demonstrated how the device produced sparking and arcing as it operated. Tesla, observing these inefficiencies, suggested to the professor that it might be possible to design a motor that ran on alternating current rather than direct current, eliminating the need for the commutator that caused the sparking. The professor publicly ridiculed this idea, telling the class that Tesla might accomplish great things but would certainly never accomplish this particular feat, as it would be the equivalent of building a perpetual motion machine. This dismissal stung, but it also planted a seed in Tesla's mind. For years afterward, he pondered the problem of how to create a practical alternating current motor. The solution, when it finally came to him, would arrive not through incremental tinkering but in a sudden flash of complete understanding. Tesla's time at Graz ended badly. He lost his scholarship due to his gambling and apparently did not take his final exams. He moved to Maribor, Slovenia, where he worked as a draftsman and continued to struggle with gambling. His family, unaware of his academic troubles, thought he had drowned when he stopped communicating with them. Eventually, he reconciled with his father and enrolled at Charles Ferdinand University in Prague, though he stayed for only one term following his father's death in 1879. These were difficult years for Tesla, marked by instability and uncertainty about his future. He was brilliant but undisciplined, passionate but impractical. He had big ideas but no clear path to realizing them. That would begin to change when he left the world of formal education and entered the working world of engineers and inventors. The revelation in Budapest in 1881. Tesla moved to Budapest, Hungary, to work for the Central Telegraph Office. A friend of his father's had helped arrange the position, and Tesla threw himself into the work. At this time, the telephone was still a relatively new technology, and the telegraph system was being expanded and modernized throughout Europe. Tesla worked on improving and installing electrical equipment, gaining practical experience that complemented his theoretical knowledge. But Budapest gave Tesla something more valuable than just work experience. It gave him the solution to the problem that had been turning over in his mind for years since that professor had mocked his suggestion about alternating current motors. One afternoon in February 1882, Tesla was walking through a park in Budapest with a friend named Anatol Szigeti, reciting passages from Goethe's Faust. Tesla loved poetry and literature as much as he loved science, and he often memorized long passages from his favorite works. As he spoke the lines, something extraordinary happened in his mind. The solution to the alternating current motor appeared to him complete and whole, as if someone had placed a blueprint directly into his thoughts. He stopped walking, grabbed a stick, and began drawing in the dirt, explaining to his confused friend exactly how the motor would work. Years later, when he finally built the motor, it would match these hasty dirt drawings in every essential detail. What Tesla had visualized was the principle of the rotating magnetic field. Instead of using a commutator to mechanically switch the current direction, as direct current motors did, his design would use multiple alternating currents that were out of phase with each other. These phase-shifted currents would create a magnetic field that rotated smoothly, causing a metal rotor to spin without any physical connection except the magnetic forces themselves. It was elegant, efficient, and would prove to be one of the fundamental building blocks of modern electrical power systems. For the next year, Tesla worked on refining his mental design, visualizing every component, testing each variation in his mind before ever touching physical materials. This was his method throughout his life. He would imagine an invention in complete detail, examine it from every angle, run it through its operations mentally, and even identify potential failures or improvements, all before building a single prototype. Only when he was satisfied that the design was correct would he construct the physical device. And remarkably, these devices usually worked exactly as he had imagined them. In 1883, Tesla moved to Paris to work for the Continental Edison Company, which was expanding Edison's direct current electrical systems throughout Europe. Here, Tesla was able to apply his skills to real electrical engineering challenges, improving dynamos and solving technical problems. He also began to discreetly build small models of his alternating current motor during his spare time. His supervisors at Continental Edison were impressed with his abilities and encouraged him to relocate to the United States to work directly with Thomas Edison himself. They gave him letters of introduction, and in 1884, Tesla boarded a ship for America with 4 cents in his pocket, the clothes he wore, a few poems he had written, and a head full of ideas that would transform the world. Edison and disappointment Tesla arrived in New York City on June 6, 1884. The city must have been overwhelming, crowded, noisy, and pulsing with energy quite different from the European capitals he had known. On his way to find his lodgings, he encountered a man struggling with an electrical machine. Unable to resist helping, Tesla stopped and fixed it on the spot, earning his first American money. When he met with Thomas Edison, carrying his letters of introduction, the two men could hardly have been more different. Edison was practical, commercially minded, and suspicious of formal mathematical education. He was famous for his insistence that genius was 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. He preferred to solve problems through endless experimentation, trying thousands of variations until he found one that worked. He had little patience for theoretical elegance or mathematical proofs. Tesla, by contrast, approached invention from a foundation of theoretical understanding. He believed that with proper analysis and visualization, you could design something correctly the first time, without need for extensive trial and error. Where Edison would test 1,000 materials to find the right filament for a light bulb, Tesla would calculate which materials should work and test only those. Edison put Tesla to work immediately, redesigning and improving his direct current dynamos and electrical systems. Tesla worked tirelessly, often from 10:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock the following morning. According to Tesla's later accounts, Edison promised him $50,000 if he could redesign and improve the efficiency of Edison's dynamos. Tesla succeeded in this task, creating significant improvements that saved the Edison Company's substantial money. When Tesla asked for his bonus, however, Edison reportedly laughed and told him he didn't understand American humor. Whether this story is entirely accurate has been debated by historians. Tesla told it consistently, but there's no independent verification, and it's possible that what Edison meant as a joke or exaggeration was taken as a serious promise by Tesla, who was not always attuned to subtle social cues. Regardless of the exact truth, what's clear is that Tesla felt betrayed and undervalued. When Edison offered him a raise of $10 per week, bringing his weekly salary from $18 to $28, Tesla quit. It was a risky move for an immigrant with minimal savings and no other employment prospects. But Tesla felt that his work and ideas were worth far more than Edison was willing to pay or even acknowledge. For the next period of his life, Tesla struggled. He formed a company called the Tesla Electric Light Company with some investors, and they tasked him with developing an arc lamp for street lighting. Tesla designed an improved arc lamp system, but once the patents were secured, the investors pushed him out of the company, taking the patents and leaving him with nothing. They were interested in commercial products they could sell immediately, not in Tesla's grander visions of alternating current systems. This betrayal stung even more than the situation with Edison. Tesla found himself doing manual labor to survive, including digging ditches for the same electrical system whose theories he had helped develop. He would later recall this as one of the darkest periods of his life, wondering if his ideas would ever find the support they needed to become reality. But during this time of digging ditches, Tesla told everyone he met about his alternating current system. And one of those people, a foreman on the crew, believed him. The foreman introduced Tesla to Alfred Brown, a Western Union superintendent and an experienced electrical engineer in his own right. Brown, in turn, brought in Charles Peck, a New York attorney. Both men were impressed by Tesla's demonstrations and his clear passion for his inventions. In April 1887, Brown and Peck helped Tesla establish the Tesla Electric Company in a laboratory at 89 Liberty Street in Manhattan. Finally, Tesla had the resources to build the motors and systems he had been perfecting in his mind for 5 years since that walk in Budapest. The reality matched his visualizations almost perfectly. The motors worked smoothly and efficiently, exactly as he had foreseen. Now came the challenge of getting these inventions noticed and accepted by a world that had already invested heavily in Edison's direct current infrastructure. The war of currents to understand the significance of Tesla's alternating current system and the conflict that followed, we need to understand the fundamental difference between alternating and direct current and why it mattered so much. Direct current flows continuously in one direction at a constant voltage, like water flowing steadily through a pipe. It's simple and straightforward. Batteries produce direct current because of the nature of chemical reactions. Early electrical systems used direct current because it was well understood and because Edison had built an enormous business around it. But direct current has a significant limitation. It's very difficult to change its voltage efficiently. If you generate electricity at a power station and want to transmit it to homes and businesses, the resistance in the wires causes energy loss that increases with distance. The only way to reduce these losses is to use higher voltages. But direct current at high voltage is dangerous for home use. Edison's solution was to build many small power stations located close to customers, each serving perhaps a mile radius. This was expensive and limited who could receive electrical service. Alternating current reverses direction many times per second, oscillating back and forth rather than flowing in one steady direction. This might seem more complicated, but it has one crucial advantage that transformers can exploit: Transformers use electromagnetic induction to easily change alternating current voltage up or down. You can generate power at a moderate voltage, step it up to very high voltage for efficient long-distance transmission, then step it back down to safe levels for homes and businesses. This means one large, efficient power plant can serve customers hundreds of miles away. Tesla's insight went beyond just recognizing this advantage. He solved the problem of how to make motors run on alternating current, which had stumped engineers for years. His rotating magnetic field design, using multiple alternating currents out of phase with each other, made it possible to power motors as well as lights with alternating current. This created a complete, integrated electrical system that was far more efficient and economical than anything direct current could offer. When Tesla applied for patents on his alternating current motor and related systems in 1887, the patent office was so impressed with the scope and originality of the work that they directed him to split his applications into 7 separate patents. These patents, numbered 381,968 through 382,282, were issued on May 1, 1888. They covered everything from the motors themselves to transformers, generators, and transmission systems. Brown and Peck arranged for Tesla to present his work to the American Institute of Electrical Engineers on May 16, 1888. The presentation was a success, and it caught the attention of George Westinghouse, an inventor and industrialist who had made his fortune on air brakes for railroads and was now building an electrical business to compete with Edison. Westinghouse immediately recognized the significance of Tesla's system. He traveled to Tesla's laboratory, saw the motors running, and within months had purchased the patents for $200,000. Equivalent to roughly $5 million today. The deal also included royalty payments for every motor produced. With this funding and support, Tesla's alternating current system finally had the backing to compete with Edison's entrenched direct current infrastructure. Edison did not take this competition lying down. He launched what can only be described as one of history's first major corporate fear campaigns, attempting to convince the public that alternating current was deadly and direct current was safe. His approach was brutal and, to modern sensibilities, shocking. Edison and his associates began publicly electrocuting animals with alternating current to demonstrate its dangers. They held demonstrations where dogs, cats, and other animals were killed with Westinghouse alternating current while similar animals survived contact with Edison's direct current at lower voltages. Edison carefully avoided mentioning that the difference in outcomes had more to do with voltage levels than with whether the current alternated or flowed in one direction. The campaign became even darker when Edison got involved in developing the electric chair for New York State, which was seeking a more humane alternative to hanging for executing condemned prisoners. Edison and his associate Harold Brown recommended using alternating current for the device, hoping to cement in the public mind an association between Westinghouse system and death. They even tried to popularize the term to Westinghouse as a synonym for electrocution. The first execution by electric chair took place on August 6, 1890, when William Kemmler was executed at Auburn State Prison in New York. The execution was botched horribly. The first jolt of 1300 volts of alternating current for 17 seconds didn't kill Kemmler. He remained alive, struggling to breathe. A second, longer jolt at 2000 volts was applied, and this time Kemmler's body caught fire. The entire ordeal took several minutes and was described by witnesses as far worse than hanging. Edison had hoped this would damage Westinghouse and alternating current. Instead, it horrified people and damaged Edison's own reputation. Throughout this period, Tesla took a very different approach to promoting alternating current. Rather than engaging in fear tactics, he focused on dramatic demonstrations of the safety and power of alternating current when properly controlled. In one famous demonstration, he passed hundreds of thousands of volts of high-frequency alternating current through his own body, using a device he invented called a Tesla coil. The high frequency meant the current traveled across his skin rather than through his internal organs, and he emerged unharmed, sometimes using the current to light wireless lamps he held in his hands or to create spectacular arcs of electricity that audiences found mesmerizing rather than frightening. The true turning point in the War of Currents came with the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, organized to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage to America. The exposition needed electrical lighting on an unprecedented scale, and both Edison's General Electric and Westinghouse Company bid for the contract. Westinghouse underbid Edison substantially, offering an alternating current system at roughly half the price Edison quoted for direct current. Westinghouse won the contract and proceeded to demonstrate what alternating current could do. The exposition became known as the White City because of the brilliant illumination provided by over 100,000 incandescent lamps, all powered by Tesla's alternating current system. Millions of visitors attended the exposition and experienced the magic of electric lighting on a scale never before seen. They saw alternating current motors running smoothly and efficiently. They watched Tesla himself demonstrate his inventions, passing current through his body and controlling electrical phenomena with what seemed like wizardry. The success was undeniable and overwhelming. After the World's Columbian Exposition, there was little doubt which system would become the standard. The final blow to Edison's direct current ambitions came with the Niagara Falls Power Project. The International Niagara Commission, formed to harness the power of Niagara Falls for electrical generation, received proposals from Edison's General Electric and from Westinghouse. After careful consideration, they awarded the contract to Westinghouse using Tesla's alternating current system. Construction began in 1893. The first generator went online on November 16, 1896, transmitting power to Buffalo, New York, more than 20 miles away. It was a technological triumph that would have been impossible with direct current. The generators bore Tesla's name on their nameplates, a recognition of his fundamental contribution to the system. By this point, even Edison's own company was beginning to shift away from his insistence on direct current. In 1892, Edison General Electric merged with Thomson Houston Electric Company to form simply General Electric, and Edison's direct control over the company diminished. The new management began investing heavily in alternating current technology. The war of currents was over, and Tesla had won. Alternating current would become the standard for electrical power transmission throughout the world, a status it maintains to this day. Every time you turn on a light or plug in an appliance, you're using a system that relies fundamentally on Tesla's innovations. But for Tesla personally, this victory would prove to be just the beginning of a long journey filled with both triumphs and profound disappointments. Colorado Springs and lightning made by human hands by the late 1890s, Tesla had achieved wealth and fame. His patents were generating substantial royalties, and he was recognized as one of the foremost electrical engineers in the world. He could have settled into a comfortable life, perfecting incremental improvements to existing technology. But Tesla's mind was not built for incremental thinking. He was drawn to grand visions, to possibilities that others considered impossible or even absurd. Tesla became increasingly fascinated by the idea of wireless transmission. Not just wireless communication, which several inventors including Guglielmo Marconi were working on, but wireless transmission of electrical power itself. He believed it should be possible to send electricity through the earth and through the atmosphere, allowing anyone anywhere to tap into this energy without wires, power lines, or expensive infrastructure. To test these ideas at the scale he envisioned, Tesla needed more space than his Manhattan laboratory could provide, and he needed to work somewhere with specific atmospheric conditions. He chose Colorado Springs, Colorado, a location at an elevation of over 6,000 feet where the thin mountain air would be more conducive to his high-voltage experiments and where frequent lightning storms would allow him to study natural electrical phenomena. With funding from John Jacob Astor, the wealthy businessman who would later perish on the Titanic, Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs in May 1899. Local power company officials, interested in the prestige of having the famous inventor in town, offered him free electricity for his experiments. Tesla, along with his assistants and a local contractor, immediately began construction of a laboratory on a hill east of the Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind. The laboratory was a simple wooden structure, approximately 50 by 60 feet, with an unusually high ceiling of 80 feet. This height was necessary to accommodate the equipment Tesla planned to build. A retractable roof allowed Tesla to open the structure to the sky when conducting certain experiments. From the outside, the building was ringed with warning signs reading "Keep Out" and "Great Danger." Inside this structure, Tesla constructed the largest Tesla coil ever built. The secondary coil was more than 50 feet in diameter. Outside the building rose a mast 142 feet tall, topped with a large copper sphere. The entire apparatus was designed to generate millions of volts of electricity and to study how electrical waves propagated through the earth and atmosphere. Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs as an experienced inventor and experimenter, but he left with ideas and observations that would shape the rest of his life and that scientists are still trying to fully understand more than a century later. His experiments in Colorado Springs produced phenomena that were visible and audible for miles. When Tesla energized his coil, bolts of artificial lightning shot from the top of the mast, some reaching lengths of 135 feet or more. The electrical discharges created thunder that could be heard 15 miles away in Cripple Creek. Butterflies and other insects that flew near the laboratory during operation would become electrostatically charged, glowing with strange blue coronas. People walking on the streets of Colorado Springs during Tesla's experiments reported feeling their hair stand on end. Horses would shy and bolt as their metal horseshoes sparked with electrical discharges. Water pipes would glow and emit sparks. The phenomena were spectacular, frightening, and unlike anything anyone had seen before. Tesla conducted experiments that seemed to demonstrate wireless power transmission. He placed incandescent light bulbs on poles at various distances from his laboratory, with no wires connecting them to any power source. When he energized his system, the bulbs would light up, glowing brightly at distances of hundreds of feet or even miles from the generating station. Photographs still exist showing fields of these wireless lamps burning brightly in the Colorado night. But Tesla's most important work in Colorado Springs involved studying the Earth itself as an electrical conductor. He monitored lightning strikes occurring across the plains and mountains, measuring the electrical waves these strikes produced. He noticed that his instruments would pick up signals from lightning strikes occurring hundreds of miles away. This led him to a profound realization that he would consider his most important discovery. Tesla became convinced that the Earth was not just a conductor but a resonant system, like a bell that could be made to ring at specific frequencies. He theorized that by injecting electrical currents into the Earth at just the right frequency, he could create standing waves that would circle the globe, traveling to the opposite side of the planet and bouncing back. If he could achieve this planetary resonance, he believed it would be possible to transmit essentially unlimited amounts of power to any point on Earth with minimal losses. His theory was that electrical impulses would travel through the Earth as longitudinal waves, different from the electromagnetic waves that most scientists focused on. While electromagnetic waves radiated out into space and weakened with distance, Tesla's proposed longitudinal waves would be guided by the Earth's conductive properties, maintaining their strength regardless of distance. On the night of July 3, 1899, Tesla believed he had achieved Earth resonance. His instruments detected rhythmic signals that seemed to be returning to his laboratory after traveling through the planet. He was so excited by this that he recorded it in his journal with multiple exclamation marks, a rare show of emotion in his usually precise technical notes. Tesla also detected mysterious signals that he could not immediately explain. In letters and later writings, he described picking up regular, rhythmic pulses that seemed too organized to be natural atmospheric noise. He speculated that these might be signals from another planet, perhaps from intelligent beings on Mars or Venus. This claim was widely mocked in the press and damaged his reputation among some scientists, but Tesla remained convinced that he had detected something of extraterrestrial origin. Modern analysis suggests several more mundane explanations for what Tesla heard. He may have picked up radio signals from Marconi's experiments in Europe. He may have detected natural radio emissions from Jupiter's moon Io passing through Jupiter's magnetic field, a phenomenon that creates rhythmic pulses. Or he may have heard pulses created by lightning strikes bouncing between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, creating a cavity resonance. But regardless of what Tesla actually detected, his conviction that he could communicate across vast distances without wires would drive his next great project. Tesla's experiments in Colorado Springs came to an abrupt end when he inadvertently caused serious damage to the Colorado Springs power station. During one particularly ambitious experiment, Tesla drew so much power that he burned out the generator at the El Paso Electric Company 6 miles away. His free electricity immediately ceased. The company demanded payment for the damage and for back electricity charges. The experiment that caused the damage had been so powerful that equipment throughout the city experienced arcing and sparking. Tesla left Colorado Springs in January 1900, intending to return but never doing so. He left behind unpaid debts to the power company, his caretaker, and various creditors. Eventually, his laboratory was torn down and sold to satisfy these debts. But Tesla took with him detailed notes covering hundreds of pages and thousands of calculations and observations. He was convinced he had proven the feasibility of worldwide wireless power transmission. Now he needed to build a full-scale implementation of his vision. He would call this implementation Wardenclyffe. The tower and the dream Tesla returned to New York energized by what he had discovered in Colorado Springs and immediately began seeking funding for his most ambitious project yet. He wanted to build a worldwide wireless system for both communication and power transmission. Multiple towers placed around the globe would work together to create a network that could transmit messages, news, music, even pictures to anyone with the right receiving equipment. More remarkably, these towers would also transmit electrical power through the ground and atmosphere, allowing anyone to tap into this energy supply without wires. To most people, this sounded like science fiction, but Tesla had the credibility to be taken seriously. He had, after all, won the war of currents and revolutionized electrical power distribution. His demonstrations were legendary. When he spoke of his vision with complete confidence, people listened. In March 1900, Tesla met with J.P. Morgan, one of the wealthiest and most powerful financiers in America. Tesla proposed building a station for wireless telegraphy that would surpass anything Marconi could achieve. Morgan was interested primarily in the communication aspects. Wireless telegraphy was already proving commercially valuable, and if Tesla could build a superior system, there would be substantial profits. Morgan agreed to invest $150,000, equivalent to roughly $5 million today. In exchange, he would own 51% of the patents related to wireless telegraphy that Tesla would develop. It was a substantial sum, though as events would prove, nowhere near enough for what Tesla actually planned to build. Tesla purchased 200 acres of land in Shoreham, on the north shore of Long Island, about 60 miles from Manhattan. The location was chosen for its proximity to New York City and for its coastal position, which Tesla believed would be advantageous for his experiments with ground conductivity. A man named James Warden sold Tesla the land at a bargain price with the understanding that the presence of Tesla's facility would increase property values in the surrounding area. Tesla hired Stanford White, a prominent architect and close friend, to design the facility. White created plans for a distinctive wooden tower 187 feet tall, topped with a large dome-shaped structure measuring 68 feet in diameter and constructed of conductive metals. Below ground, the design called for an extensive network of iron rods and copper plates driven deep into the earth to establish a strong electrical connection with the ground. Construction began in September 1901, but almost immediately, problems arose. The project was expensive, far more so than Tesla's initial estimates. The specialized materials and construction techniques required constant infusions of money. Morgan had provided the initial $150,000, but he made it clear this was the entirety of his investment. Any cost overruns would be Tesla's problem. Tesla made a critical mistake in his dealings with Morgan. Rather than being transparent about his broader vision for wireless power transmission, he had focused on wireless communication to secure funding. Once construction was well underway, Tesla wrote to Morgan explaining that his system would do far more than just send messages. It would transmit power wirelessly, revolutionize global communications, and make obsolete not just telegraph wires but potentially all wired transmission of electricity. Morgan's response was decidedly cool. From Morgan's perspective, he had invested in a wireless telegraphy system because there was a clear market and profit potential. Wireless power transmission was unproven, economically uncertain, and would undermine the existing electrical infrastructure in which Morgan and his associates had substantial investments. Moreover, Marconi had successfully transmitted wireless telegraph signals across the Atlantic in December 1901 while Tesla was still building his tower. The race Tesla hoped to win was already being lost. When Tesla asked Morgan for additional funding to complete the project and expand its capabilities, Morgan refused. In a letter dated July 14, 1903, Morgan wrote, "I have received your letter and in reply would say that I should not feel disposed at present to make any further advances." This was a death sentence for the Wardenclyffe project. Tesla spent the next several years desperately seeking alternative funding. He wrote letters to potential investors, demonstrating his inventions, trying to explain why his vision was worth pursuing despite Marconi's head start in wireless communication. He found no takers. The business community had decided that Marconi's simpler system was the commercially viable path forward. In a last-ditch effort to generate publicity and perhaps attract new investors, Tesla conducted some nighttime tests of the Wardenclyffe Tower in July 1903. Newspapers reported that the tower came alive after dark, shooting bright flashes of light into the sky that could be seen for miles. The displays continued for several nights. Reporters came to investigate, but Tesla and his workers offered no explanations. Then the tower fell silent and never operated again. The reason for Tesla's silence about these tests is not entirely clear. He may have achieved some preliminary results and wanted to keep them secret until he could secure new funding. Or he may have simply been conducting basic tests of the equipment. Or, as some have speculated, the displays may have been a last, desperate attempt to generate publicity and convince anyone, that his vision was within reach of realization. But no funding came. The Wardenclyffe project slowly collapsed under its own weight. Tesla had invested his own money, borrowed extensively, and mortgaged his assets to try to keep the work going. By 1906, he had run out of options. The facility stood incomplete and silent, a monument to a dream that had exceeded both the available technology and the willingness of investors to take risks on unproven concepts. Tesla's financial situation became increasingly dire. He moved from hotel to hotel in New York City, often leaving unpaid bills in his wake. In 1917, the Wardenclyffe Tower was demolished and sold for scrap metal to partially satisfy Tesla's debts. The buyer, a company that had purchased the property, used dynamite to bring down the tower. After the first explosion, the tower stood tilted at an angle, a fitting symbol for a partially realized vision, before workers pulled it completely down. The red brick laboratory building survived and still stands today, the only remaining Tesla laboratory in existence. It has since been preserved as the Tesla Science Center at Wardenclyffe, a museum dedicated to his work and legacy. The failure of Wardenclyffe marked a turning point in Tesla's life. His most ambitious vision had come closer to realization than most people knew, but had still fallen short. The setback was both financial and psychological. Tesla would continue to work and invent for decades more, but he would never again have the resources to pursue his grandest dreams on the scale he envisioned. The middle years and the tides of fortune, the years between the Wardenclyffe collapse and the First World War, were difficult for Tesla, but they were not without accomplishment. Despite his financial struggles, he continued to invent and imagine. His mind remained as active and brilliant as ever, even as his circumstances became increasingly constrained. One of Tesla's more successful inventions from this period was the bladeless turbine, which he patented in 1909. Unlike conventional turbines that used blades to convert fluid flow into rotational motion, Tesla's design used a series of smooth, flat discs mounted on a shaft. Fluid entering the turbine would spiral inward between the discs, its adhesion to the disc surfaces creating drag that caused them to rotate. The design was elegant, simple, and potentially very efficient. Tesla demonstrated a prototype that achieved remarkable performance. He claimed his turbine could convert the energy of pressurized gas or steam into rotational power with far greater efficiency than bladed turbines. Some tests appeared to support this, showing efficiencies that exceeded 90% under certain conditions. The turbine also had the advantage of being able to run on fuels that would damage conventional turbines, since it had no blades that could be eroded or pitted. Despite these advantages, the bladeless turbine never achieved commercial success during Tesla's lifetime. Engineers found that while it worked well in the laboratory, scaling it up to industrial sizes presented challenges. The tight tolerances required between the discs and the casing were difficult to maintain in large units. The turbine also worked best at very high rotational speeds, which required specialized bearings and presented control challenges. Still, the concept was sound, and modern versions of Tesla's bladeless turbine have been developed and found applications in certain niche areas. The fundamental idea of using disc drag rather than bladed action remains an intriguing alternative approach to turbine design. During these middle years, Tesla also developed his speedometer design, which found commercial success. The speedometer used a rotating magnetic field to create a drag effect on a metal disc, causing it to turn proportionally to the speed of rotation. This was a practical application of the same magnetic principles that had guided his motor designs decades earlier. Automobile manufacturers licensed the design, and it became a standard feature in cars for many years. Tesla's financial situation improved somewhat during the 1910s. In 1915, reports surfaced that Tesla and Edison would share that year's Nobel Prize in Physics. The newspapers announced this as if it were confirmed, and the scientific community buzzed with discussion of how appropriate or ironic it might be for these two rivals to share the honor. But the Nobel Prize that year went instead to William Henry Bragg and William Lawrence Bragg, a father-son team who had made important discoveries about X-ray crystallography. Whether Tesla and Edison were actually nominated and then declined to share the prize, or whether the newspaper reports were simply erroneous, has never been definitively established. Tesla later claimed he refused the prize because he did not want to share it with Edison. Edison said nothing publicly about the matter. The Nobel Prize organization does not reveal their nomination lists or deliberations for 50 years. And when the 1915 records were finally released, they showed that Tesla and Edison had not actually been nominated that year by anyone whose nomination would have been considered official. It's another one of those stories that has become inseparable from the Tesla legend, where the exact truth is hard to determine and probably less interesting than the larger pattern it reveals about how Tesla was perceived and how he perceived himself. What is clear is that Tesla never won the Nobel Prize, though he received numerous other honors and awards throughout his life. In 1917, he received the Edison Medal from the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, the organization's highest honor. This must have been bittersweet, given the medal bore the name of his old rival. Tesla initially considered refusing it, but was convinced by a friend to accept. At the ceremony, Tesla gave a gracious speech acknowledging the honor while also noting that he had been working on ideas far beyond what any medals recognized. Through these middle years, Tesla continued to live in a series of New York hotels, moving frequently, accumulating debts, and pursuing his research whenever he could find the resources. He became increasingly isolated from the mainstream scientific community, in part because his ideas had become so unconventional that few could follow his reasoning, and in part because his financial difficulties made it hard for him to participate in the social networks through which scientific collaboration often occurred. Tesla developed a set of personal habits and rituals that grew more rigid over time. He required exactly 18 linen napkins at each meal, which he used to polish all his utensils and glasses before eating. He calculated the cubic volume of each piece of food he consumed before eating it. He would walk around a building 3 times before entering it. He had a profound fear of germs and avoided shaking hands with people. He insisted that the number of objects in his environment be divisible by 3. These compulsive behaviors, which today might be recognized as symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder, had been present in milder forms throughout his life but intensified as he aged. Tesla himself seemed aware that these behaviors were unusual but felt unable or unwilling to change them. He described feeling a strong compulsion that could not be resisted. Despite these eccentricities, Tesla remained socially active in certain circles. He was friends with writers like Rudyard Kipling and Mark Twain. He attended dinner parties and was known for his courtly European manners and his ability to converse knowledgeably on topics ranging from philosophy to linguistics. He was tall, thin, and always impeccably dressed, often in formal clothes that may have been decades out of fashion but were maintained in perfect condition. Tesla never married and apparently had no romantic relationships. When asked about this, he sometimes said he was married to his work, and that emotional attachments would distract from the clarity of thought necessary for invention. He also expressed views about women that were complex and sometimes contradictory. He admired women's potential intellectual and creative capabilities and predicted that women would eventually become the superior sex through education and social evolution. But he also felt that the contemporary woman's movement toward independence and equality might lead to conflicts that would damage society. These views reflect the complicated attitudes of his time, filtered through Tesla's particular personality and experiences. They were sincere but also served as rationalizations for his chosen solitude. The truth was likely simpler. Tesla's mind was so occupied with his inventions and visions that he had little capacity left for the compromises and attention that relationships require. As World War I engulfed Europe and eventually drew in the United States, Tesla watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. He wrote articles predicting how warfare would change with the application of electrical and wireless technologies. Some of his predictions were remarkably prescient. He foresaw remotely controlled vehicles, wireless command and control systems, and the increasing mechanization of warfare. Other predictions were more fanciful. He proposed particle beam weapons that could destroy aircraft at hundreds of miles range and electrical force fields that could protect entire territories. The war years brought Tesla some renewed attention, as governments became interested in any potentially useful military technologies. Tesla proposed several inventions to the military, including systems for detecting submarines and aircraft using electrical principles. Some of his ideas anticipated the development of radar, though his specific approaches were not the ones that proved practical. When the war ended in 1918, Tesla was 62 years old. His greatest accomplishments were decades behind him, but his greatest fame and his deepest descent into poverty and isolation still lay ahead. Pigeons and press conferences the 1920s and 30s saw a curious pattern in Tesla's public life. On one hand, he was increasingly recognized as a pioneering figure in electrical engineering, someone whose early work had made the modern electrical age possible. On the other hand, his contemporary ideas were becoming increasingly grandiose and untethered from practical demonstration. Tesla had always enjoyed publicity and knew how to capture the public's attention. In his earlier years, this talent served him well, bringing attention to genuine technological breakthroughs. But as he aged and his financial resources dwindled, he began to rely more heavily on spectacular claims to maintain public interest and the hope of attracting new funding. Starting in the early 1920s, Tesla began giving annual birthday press conferences. Each July 10th, reporters would gather to hear the elderly inventor's latest pronouncements. These events became a regular feature of the New York press calendar, anticipated for the mixture of legitimate scientific insight and wild speculation they would produce. At his 78th birthday press conference in 1934, Tesla announced he had invented a death beam weapon. He described it as a particle beam accelerator that could shoot microscopic particles at velocities approaching the speed of light, creating a defensive wall that could destroy any aircraft within hundreds of miles. He claimed the device could shoot down 10,000 airplanes at a range of 250 miles. The press dubbed it the Peace Ray, suggesting it could make war obsolete by making invasion impossible. Tesla tried to sell this invention to several governments, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. He prepared detailed technical documents describing the principles involved. But no government was willing to fund development of a device that existed only in Tesla's descriptions and sketches. Some officials were polite, thanking him for his patriotic service while declining the offer. Others simply ignored him. The death ray may have been based on genuine physics principles. Tesla was describing a type of particle accelerator decades before such devices became practical in physics laboratories. But he had no working prototype, no experimental evidence, and no realistic pathway to building such a device with the resources available to him. The gap between concept and realization had become unbridgeable at other birthday conferences. Tesla made various claims. He described a machine that could photograph thoughts, capturing the visual images in the human brain onto photographic film. He spoke of a device that could harness cosmic ray energy, providing unlimited free power. He proposed an electrical wall of force that could destroy any target within its range. He discussed his conviction that the Earth could be split in half using correctly tuned electrical resonance. Some of these ideas had kernels of legitimate science. Others were pure fantasy. And for most of them, it was impossible for observers to determine which category they fell into because Tesla provided no working demonstrations, only verbal descriptions and occasional sketches. The press treated these announcements with a mixture of respect for Tesla's past achievements and gentle mockery of his current claims. Headlines would call him a wizard or a seer while simultaneously questioning whether his ideas were practical. The public enjoyed the spectacle. Here was this elderly, dignified man with a distinguished past, making claims that sounded like they came from science fiction novels. But there was a sadness beneath the spectacle. Tesla was desperately trying to remain relevant. to convince someone that he still had important contributions to make if only he could find the funding. The annual press conferences were a form of advertisement, a plea for resources that never materialized. During these years, Tesla developed a relationship with pigeons that would become one of the most commented upon aspects of his later life. He had always liked animals and fed pigeons in the parks of New York City. But this casual activity gradually became something more central to his daily routine. Tesla would walk to parks, especially Bryant Park near the New York Public Library, several times a day to feed the pigeons. He began to recognize individual birds and believe they recognized him. He felt he could communicate with them, that they understood his moods and responded to his presence. He spent substantial portions of his limited income on birdseed and even on treatments for injured pigeons. When he became too ill to go to the parks himself, Tesla would have people bring pigeons to his hotel room. He kept several pigeons in his rooms, caring for them himself despite hotel regulations against keeping animals. When hotel managers objected, Tesla would simply move to a different hotel, repeating the cycle. Tesla wrote about one particular white pigeon with gray-tipped wings that became especially important to him. He described her as the most beautiful bird he had ever seen and claimed to love her as a man loves a woman. He said that as long as he had her, his life had purpose. When this pigeon became ill, Tesla spent significant resources trying to save her. When she died, he claimed that in her final moments, her eyes emitted intense beams of light, a vision that he interpreted as her farewell to him. After this pigeon's death, Tesla said he knew his life's work was finished. Whether this statement was literal or metaphorical, it marked a psychological turning point. Tesla continued to live for several more years, but something essential seemed to have gone out of him. The relationship with the pigeons has been interpreted in various ways. Some see it as evidence of mental deterioration or of loneliness so profound that he sought companionship from animals when human connections had failed. Others see it more sympathetically as a gentle eccentricity, a source of genuine comfort and purpose for someone who had been disappointed by human institutions and relationships. Tesla's living situation during these final years became increasingly precarious. He moved among a series of New York hotels, staying at each until his unpaid bills became too large, then moving to the next. The hotels tolerated this because of his fame and because hotel executives hoped he might somehow repay his debts or bring prestige to their establishments. Tesla always promised that patents would soon generate revenue or that new inventions would attract investors. These promises never materialized. The Westinghouse Electric Corporation, recognizing its debt to Tesla's pioneering work, quietly arranged to pay his hotel and living expenses starting in the late 1920s. They did this discreetly, understanding that Tesla's pride would be wounded if he knew he was receiving what amounted to charity. Westinghouse paid his monthly room and board at the Hotel New Yorker, where Tesla spent his final years. It was a compassionate gesture from a corporation that had profited enormously from Tesla's inventions. Tesla spent his days following a rigid routine. He would wake at precisely the same time each morning, do his exercises, eat his carefully calculated meals, feed the pigeons, and work on his papers and diagrams. He was developing theoretical ideas about particle physics, cosmology, and the nature of matter and energy. Some of these ideas aligned with emerging physics. Others contradicted the mainstream understanding that was developing through quantum mechanics and relativity. Tesla was dismissive of Einstein's theory of relativity, particularly the idea that mass and energy were interconvertible according to the equation E equals mc squared. He insisted that energy and matter were fundamentally different and could not be converted one into the other. This put him at odds with the direction physics was taking, as experimental evidence was increasingly supporting Einstein's framework. Tesla's rejection of relativity and quantum mechanics wasn't entirely unreasonable from his perspective. He had been trained in an era of classical physics when electromagnetic theory and Newtonian mechanics were the cutting edge of knowledge. The new physics, with its paradoxes and probabilistic interpretation of reality, violated Tesla's fundamental intuitions about how nature worked. He trusted his own experimental observations and theoretical frameworks, which had served him brilliantly in his youth, even as the scientific community moved in directions he couldn't accept. In his final years, Tesla was working on what he called a dynamic theory of gravity, which he claimed would replace Einstein's relativity with a more accurate description of gravitational phenomena based on electromagnetic principles. He described this theory in general terms in various writings and interviews, but never published the complete mathematical formulation. After his death, no complete documents describing this theory were found among his papers, leading to ongoing speculation about what exactly he had developed and whether it had any merit. Tesla gave his last extended interview to a reporter named John O'Neill in the early 1940s. In this interview, he recounted memories from his long life, spoke about his regrets and satisfactions, and offered predictions about humanity's future. He expressed optimism about technological progress and believed that humanity would eventually overcome war, poverty, and disease through the application of scientific knowledge and electrical technology. On January 7, 1943, Tesla placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door at the Hotel New Yorker and instructed the staff not to enter his room under any circumstances. This was not unusual for him. He often went days without allowing housekeeping to enter. But this time, he would not emerge. On the evening of January 7th, Tesla was found dead in his room. The official cause of death was determined to be coronary thrombosis, a blood clot in the heart. He was 86 years old. The maid who discovered his body reported that he appeared to have died peacefully in his sleep. The news of Tesla's death made headlines around the world. Obituaries appeared in newspapers internationally, recounting his contributions to electrical engineering and his colorful life. Eleanor Roosevelt spoke about him on her radio program. The mayor of New York City, Fiorello LaGuardia, read a eulogy on the radio. On January 12th, a funeral service was held at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Manhattan. More than 2,000 people attended. Tesla's body was cremated, and his ashes were eventually placed in a golden sphere, now on display at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade, Serbia. But before the funeral, something unusual happened that would fuel decades of speculation and conspiracy theories. The missing papers. When Tesla died, he left behind a lifetime's accumulation of papers, notebooks, diagrams, and correspondence. Some were in his hotel room, others were in storage. The question of what to do with these papers, and who had the right to them, created immediate complications. The United States was in the middle of World War II. The government was intensely interested in any technology that might provide military advantage. Tesla had made claims about death ray weapons, particle beam accelerators, and other advanced technologies. Officials wanted to know if there was anything in his papers that could be useful to the war effort. 2 days after Tesla's death, representatives from the Office of Alien Property Custodian arrived at the Hotel New Yorker and seized Tesla's belongings. The technical reason for this seizure was that Tesla had never become a United States citizen. He had remained a citizen of Austria-Hungary until that empire dissolved after World War I, at which point his citizenship status became ambiguous. This technicality allowed the government to classify his property as potentially alien-owned and subject to wartime seizure. The seized materials were examined by John G. Trump, an electrical engineer and professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology who was also the uncle of future President Donald Trump. John Trump was working with the National Defense Research Committee and had high-level security clearances. He was tasked with analyzing Tesla's papers to determine if they contained anything of military value or anything that should be kept secret for national security reasons. After several days of examination, Trump submitted a report concluding that Tesla's papers contained mostly speculative theories rather than working designs or practical applications. The report stated that there was nothing that would constitute a hazard in unfriendly hands and that the papers were primarily of historical and sentimental value rather than practical scientific worth. This conclusion has been questioned by some Tesla enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists who believe that the government discovered something significant and covered it up. They point out that only a few days of examination seems insufficient to thoroughly review what was reportedly 80 trunks worth of documents. They note that some of Tesla's papers appear to have gone missing and have never been accounted for. And they suggest that Trump's dismissive conclusion might have been deliberately misleading to hide the discovery of advanced weapon designs or free energy technologies. The more prosaic explanation is probably closer to the truth. Tesla in his later years had generated volumes of theoretical speculations and conceptual sketches but had built very few actual devices. His claims about death rays and other wonders were based on physical principles that he understood, but the gap between understanding a principle and creating a practical device is enormous. Trump, as a knowledgeable electrical engineer, would have been able to distinguish between practical designs and theoretical musings relatively quickly. Most of Tesla's papers were eventually released to his family and are now housed in the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. Researchers have been able to study them extensively. While they contain fascinating insights into Tesla's thought processes and theoretical ideas, they have not revealed hidden superweapon designs or free energy devices. That said, some papers did go missing, and their fate remains unclear. Whether they were lost, misfiled in government archives, destroyed, or removed by someone for unknown purposes is a question that probably cannot be definitively answered at this point. The missing papers serve as a Rorschach test. People see in them either confirmation of conspiracies or simply the mundane chaos that often surrounds the handling of a deceased person's effects. What we do know is that Tesla's actual inventions, the ones he built and patented and demonstrated, were revolutionary enough without needing to add speculative weapons or miracle devices. The alternating current system, the Tesla coil, the bladeless turbine, the speedometer, and numerous other innovations were genuine achievements that changed the world. The legacy and the questions in the decades since Tesla's death, his reputation has gone through several transformations. Immediately after his death, he was remembered as an important but somewhat eccentric figure from the early days of electrical engineering. His contributions to alternating current were acknowledged, but he was generally seen as less practical and less successful than contemporaries like Edison or Marconi. Starting in the 1970s and accelerating through the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Tesla's reputation underwent a dramatic rehabilitation. He became something of a cult figure, celebrated as an underappreciated genius whose ideas were too advanced for his time. Books, articles, and eventually movies portrayed him as a visionary whose grander dreams were suppressed by greedy businessmen or fearful governments. This rehabilitated image is closer to the truth in some ways but also tends toward hagiography. The reality, as usual, is more complex. Tesla was undoubtedly a genius with a remarkable ability to visualize and understand electromagnetic phenomena. His contributions to alternating current systems were foundational and world-changing. But he also had significant blind spots. He was better at conceptualizing systems than at managing the practical and financial aspects of bringing them to market. His later theoretical ideas, while interesting, were often not supported by experimental evidence and sometimes contradicted well-established physics. The question of whether Tesla's wireless power transmission would have worked remains genuinely open in some respects. Modern physicists and engineers have revisited his Wardenclyffe plans and conducted new analyses. The consensus is that some of what Tesla envisioned might have been possible, but not in the way he imagined and not with the efficiency he claimed. Wireless power transmission is indeed possible and is used today in various applications, from wireless phone chargers to experimental systems for powering electric vehicles. But these systems work over short ranges and use different principles than Tesla's proposed Earth resonance method. Long-range wireless power transmission faces fundamental physical limitations. The inverse square law means that broadcast power weakens rapidly with distance. While Tesla's idea of using the Earth as a waveguide might partially bypass this limitation, it would still face enormous technical challenges and would likely be far less efficient than conventional transmission lines for most applications. Some researchers have suggested that Tesla's real innovation at Wardenclyffe wasn't wireless power but extremely low-frequency communication, which can penetrate deeply into water and earth. Such systems have since been developed for communicating with submarines and for certain geological research applications. If this is what Tesla was actually pursuing, either primarily or as a secondary application, then Wardenclyffe may have been more practical than generally assumed, though still ahead of its time technologically and commercially. The stories of Tesla's death ray and other exotic weapons have also been reassessed. The particle beam accelerator concept he described has some basis in real physics. Charged particles can indeed be accelerated to very high velocities and directed as beams. But creating a weapon-grade particle beam requires enormous amounts of energy, sophisticated focusing and targeting systems, and technologies that didn't exist in Tesla's era and are barely practical even today. The death ray was a legitimate concept, but one that Tesla had no means to actually build. Tesla's ideas about extracting energy from cosmic rays or from the Earth's electrical field also fall into this category of theoretically possible, but practically unrealizable, at least with current or foreseeable technology. The energy is there, but capturing it in useful amounts and at reasonable cost remains beyond our capabilities. In assessing Tesla's legacy, we need to hold two ideas simultaneously. First, he was a genuine revolutionary whose work on alternating current and electromagnetic systems enabled the modern electrical grid and countless technologies that depend on it. Every person alive today benefits daily from systems that Tesla helped create. Second, his later claims often exceeded both the available technology and his ability to demonstrate their validity, and while some may prove prescient, others were likely impossible given physical constraints. Tesla also represents something broader than just his specific inventions. He embodies the archetype of the visionary inventor, someone willing to pursue ideas that others dismiss as impossible. In an age that increasingly emphasized team-based research, institutional backing, and incremental progress, Tesla remained committed to the individual inventor pursuing grand visions. This approach led to both his greatest successes and his ultimate failures. There's something poignant about Tesla's trajectory, from impoverished immigrant to celebrated inventor to impoverished recluse. The arc suggests questions about how society values and supports innovation, about the tension between practical commercialization and ambitious research, about the costs of being too far ahead of your time. If Tesla had been born a generation later, would his talents have found better expression in the structured environment of a research laboratory or university? Or would that very structure have constrained the creative freedom that made his breakthrough visions possible? If he had been more practical and commercial in his focus, might he have maintained the financial resources to pursue his later ideas? Or would that very practicality have prevented him from conceiving those ambitious visions in the first place? These counterfactuals are unanswerable but worth pondering as we consider how to support and nurture innovation in our own time. The personal Tesla beyond the inventions and the patents and the grand visions. It's worth spending some time considering Tesla as a person, with all the complexity that entails. By all accounts, Tesla was a man of contradictions. He could be charming and personable in social settings, Yet he lived a profoundly isolated life with no close personal relationships. He was generous with his ideas, freely sharing information with other researchers. Yet he jealously guarded credit for his inventions and was quick to feel slighted. He could be humble about his own limitations in some contexts while making grandiose claims in others. Tesla's relationship with money was particularly complicated. In his younger years, when royalties from his AC patents were generating substantial income, he spent lavishly. He lived in expensive hotels, dined at the finest restaurants, wore custom-tailored clothes, and invested heavily in his laboratory experiments. He seemed to have little concern for saving or planning financially for the future, trusting that his inventions would continue to generate resources as needed. This proved to be a serious miscalculation. When Westinghouse faced financial difficulties in the 1890s, Tesla allegedly tore up his royalty contract to help save the company, forfeiting millions of dollars in guaranteed payments. Whether this act was purely altruistic or whether Tesla was pressured into it remains debated, but the result was that his most valuable patents began generating far less personal income. Later in life, when Tesla desperately needed funding for Wardenclyffe and subsequent projects, potential investors looked at his history and saw someone who had made poor business decisions and couldn't be trusted to manage resources effectively. This created a vicious cycle. Lack of funding prevented him from building demonstrations that might have attracted funding. Tesla's peculiarities and compulsions have been much discussed. The requirement that everything be divisible by 3, the elaborate rituals around food and cleaning, the aversion to round objects, the fear of germs, the inability to tolerate pearls or the sight of women wearing pearl earrings. These were not affectations but genuine compulsions that caused him distress when he couldn't satisfy them. In the context of modern psychology, Tesla would likely be diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, and possibly with other conditions affecting sensory processing or social interaction. Some have suggested autism spectrum characteristics, particularly given his extraordinary focus, his visual spatial abilities, his difficulty with typical social interactions, and his sensory sensitivities, but diagnosis across time and without direct examination is speculative and perhaps misses the point. Tesla functioned successfully in many contexts despite his peculiarities. He had friends, engaged in society, and accomplished remarkable work. His unusual cognition, whatever its source, was inseparable from his inventive abilities. The same visual thinking that allowed him to design complex machinery entirely in his mind also produced the hallucinations and visions that troubled him. The intense focus that enabled breakthrough insights also manifested as compulsive counting and ritual behaviors. Tesla's celibacy and lack of romantic relationships was, by his own account, a conscious choice to avoid distractions from his work. Whether this was entirely true or whether it also reflected difficulty with emotional intimacy is something we cannot know. What's clear is that Tesla channeled all of his emotional energy into his inventions and, in his later years, into his relationships with pigeons. The episode with the white pigeon he loved is often cited as evidence of mental deterioration, but it might be understood more sympathetically. Tesla was describing, in the language available to him, a profound emotional connection to a living being that depended on him and that he felt understood him. That he channeled his capacity for love toward an animal rather than a person may speak to disappointment with human relationships or to a temperament that found animal companionship less demanding and more reliable. When Tesla described the pigeon's eyes emitting beams of light as she died, he was almost certainly experiencing a vision, one of the vivid mental images he had struggled with since childhood. But the meaning he assigned to that vision, his feeling that it marked the end of his life's purpose, was emotionally real and significant regardless of its objective reality. In his final years, Tesla apparently found a degree of peace in his rigid routines and simple pleasures. He had his pigeons, his theoretical work, his memories of past triumphs, and his dreams of what might have been. If that sounds sad, it perhaps was. But it was also dignified in its way. Tesla remained himself, pursuing his interests according to his own understanding, until the very end. The science behind the legend to truly appreciate Tesla's achievements and understand the limits of his later claims. It helps to examine some of the actual science involved in his major inventions and proposals. The rotating magnetic field that powers Tesla's AC motor relies on a beautiful piece of physics. When you have two or more alternating currents that are out of phase with each other, meaning they reach their peaks and valleys at different times, and you use them to energize electromagnets arranged around a circle, something remarkable happens. The combined magnetic field from all the electromagnets doesn't just oscillate back and forth. Instead, it rotates smoothly around the circle. Imagine two people pushing a playground carousel from opposite sides. If they push in perfect synchronization, the carousel won't turn smoothly. It will lurch forward and back. But if they push with a slight timing difference, one beginning to push just as the other is finishing, the carousel will spin smoothly. Tesla's polyphase AC motor does something similar with magnetic fields. This rotating magnetic field induces currents in a conductive rotor placed at the center. These induced currents create their own magnetic field, which interacts with the rotating external field, causing the rotor to turn. The beauty of this design is that there are no physical contacts between the stationary part of the motor and the rotating part, except for the bearings that support the shaft. Everything else happens through electromagnetic induction across empty space. The Tesla coil, another of his famous inventions, works on the principle of resonant energy transfer. A Tesla coil has two parts, a primary coil with just a few turns of heavy wire, and a secondary coil with many turns of fine wire wrapped around a cylindrical form. The primary coil is connected to a capacitor and a spark gap or other switching device. When the switch closes, current surges through the primary coil, creating a magnetic field. This magnetic field couples with the secondary coil, inducing a voltage in it. Because the secondary coil has many more turns than the primary, the voltage is stepped up dramatically. But here's the clever part. The primary circuit is designed to oscillate at the same frequency as the natural resonant frequency of the secondary coil. When you push a child on a swing, you don't push randomly. You push in rhythm with the swing's natural frequency, and each push adds to the energy already in the system. Similarly, the Tesla coil's primary circuit pulses energy into the secondary at just the right frequency, and the voltage in the secondary builds to enormous levels through this resonant amplification. Tesla coils can generate voltages of hundreds of thousands or even millions of volts. These high voltages at high frequencies create all sorts of interesting effects. They can ionize air, creating glowing coronas and long electrical discharges that look like lightning. They can light fluorescent tubes without any wire connection, simply by inducing currents in the tube when it's brought near the coil. They can produce radio frequency emissions that Tesla investigated for wireless communication and power transmission. The wireless power transmission that Tesla envisioned went beyond simple Tesla coils. His plan at Wardenclyffe was to use the Earth itself as part of the electrical circuit. The idea was based on his observations that the Earth is electrically conductive and that electrical waves could propagate through it. Tesla proposed creating standing waves in the Earth by injecting electrical currents at specific frequencies that matched the Earth's natural resonant modes. If you've ever seen a guitar string vibrating, you've seen a standing wave. The string vibrates in a pattern where certain points remain stationary while other points oscillate with maximum amplitude. Tesla believed similar standing waves could be established in the Earth's electrical properties. If such standing waves could be created globally, then theoretically, you could tap into them anywhere on Earth and extract electrical energy. The system would work something like a worldwide resonance circuit, with energy sloshing back and forth through the planet itself. Modern analysis suggests this idea faces several fundamental problems. First, the Earth is not a perfect conductor, and energy would be lost to resistance as currents flowed through it. Second, establishing a coherent standing wave pattern globally would require enormous power and precise tuning. Third, the presence of the ionosphere and Earth's magnetic field creates complex interactions that Tesla didn't fully account for. Fourth, even if the system could work technically, it would be extremely inefficient compared to conventional transmission lines for most purposes. But the idea wasn't entirely absurd. Ultra-low frequency radio waves can indeed propagate through the Earth and oceans, which is why they're used for submarine communication. And wireless power transfer is possible over short to medium distances using magnetic resonance coupling, a technique that bears some similarity to Tesla's proposals even though it works on different principles. Tesla's conception of how electrical energy propagated also differed from the electromagnetic wave theory that was becoming standard in physics. He thought of electrical disturbances as propagating through media like the Earth or air as longitudinal pressure waves, similar to sound waves, rather than as transverse electromagnetic waves. This was actually closer to how some early electrical theorists thought about electricity. But by Tesla's time, James Clerk Maxwell's electromagnetic theory, which treats light and radio waves as transverse electromagnetic oscillations, had become the accepted framework. Tesla's resistance to accepting Maxwell's theory fully may have hampered his understanding of some phenomena, but it also led him to investigate effects that other scientists overlooked. His focus on Earth currents, resonance effects, and high-frequency electrical phenomena opened up areas of research that were genuine contributions even if his theoretical framework was eventually superseded. The particle beam weapon Tesla proposed in his later years was based on the idea of accelerating microscopic particles to very high velocities using electrical fields. This is indeed how particle accelerators work. In a particle accelerator, charged particles such as electrons or protons are guided and accelerated by carefully controlled electric and magnetic fields until they reach enormous speeds, sometimes approaching the speed of light. Modern particle accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider are among the largest and most complex machines ever built, stretching for kilometers and consuming vast amounts of energy. They require ultra-high vacuum systems, extremely precise magnetic control, and sophisticated detection equipment. Even with all this, using a particle beam as a practical weapon remains extraordinarily difficult. The beam tends to spread out in air, losing focus and energy. The power requirements are immense, and aiming such a beam over long distances with destructive precision is far beyond what Tesla could realistically have achieved with the technology of his time. This doesn't mean Tesla's idea was pure fantasy. It means that, like many of his later concepts, it belonged more to the future than to his own era. He could see the direction physics and engineering might one day take, but he did not have the tools, the materials, or the institutional support to turn those visions into working machines. The same is true of many of his grandest dreams. He was often conceptually right but practically early. This pattern runs throughout Tesla's life. He wasn't just an inventor of devices. He was, above all, an inventor of possibilities. The man who lived in the future. Tesla once said that he did not work for the present, but for the future. This was not a metaphor. It was a literal description of how his mind worked. Where other engineers looked for improvements to existing machines, Tesla imagined entirely new systems. Where others asked what could be built with current technology, Tesla asked what should be possible according to the laws of nature. This is a rare and dangerous way to think, because it places you constantly at risk of being misunderstood, underfunded, and dismissed. Sometimes Tesla was vindicated within his own lifetime. Alternating current is the most obvious example. Radio, remote control, high-frequency electrical engineering, and aspects of wireless communication also bear his fingerprints. Other times, he was only partially right, or right in principle but wrong in execution. And sometimes, he was simply wrong. But even his failures were usually failures of scale, not of imagination. He was trying to build systems that the world did not yet know how to support. A reputation rewritten. In the decades after his death, Tesla slowly transformed from a historical figure into a cultural icon. His name began to appear in novels, films, video games, and internet discussions. He became a symbol of the forgotten genius, the brilliant mind ignored by society, the visionary crushed by business interests and short-sighted institutions. In popular culture, he is sometimes portrayed almost as a mythic figure, a wizard of electricity, a prophet of lost technologies, a man whose greatest inventions were stolen or suppressed. The truth, as always, is both more modest and more impressive. Tesla does not need secret superweapons or hidden free energy machines to justify his place in history. The real technologies he created already changed the world more profoundly than most people realize. The global electrical grid, modern motors, much of radio and high-frequency engineering, these are not footnotes. They are the infrastructure of civilization. At the same time, it's also true that Tesla was not good at navigating the world of business, institutions, and long-term project management. He was not a team builder. He was not a strategist. He was not a careful steward of his own resources. He was a solitary mind, working at a scale that increasingly required large organizations and coordinated effort. In the 20th century, science was becoming industrial. Tesla remained artisanal. What Tesla teaches us? Tesla's life forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions. How many ideas are lost not because they are wrong, but because they are too early? How many potential breakthroughs die not in laboratories, but in bank offices and funding committees? How should a society balance safe, incremental progress against risky, transformative visions? Tesla is not a simple hero or a simple victim. He is a case study in the price of thinking too far ahead, and in the cost of not knowing how to bring others with you. He shows us that imagination alone is not enough. But he also shows us that without imagination, nothing truly new is ever born. The quiet ending. In his final years, alone in his hotel room, feeding pigeons and sketching theories that would never be built, Tesla might have looked like a tragic figure. And in some ways, he was. But there is another way to see it. He had already changed the world. The lights of every modern city, the hum of every electric motor, the invisible fields that power our machines, all of these are, in part, echoes of his mind. He did not die surrounded by laboratories or students or factories. He died quietly, almost anonymously, in a small room, with his thoughts and his birds. But the world he helped create did not grow quiet. The final measure. Nikola Tesla was not a man who fit comfortably into his time. He belonged, in some sense, to a future that arrived without him. He saw a world connected by invisible energy, by wireless signals, by systems that spanned continents. We now live in that world. We carry it in our pockets. We build it into our cities. We depend on it every second of our lives. And yet, most people who benefit from it have never heard his name. Perhaps that is the final irony. Or perhaps it is the final proof that he succeeded. Because the greatest technologies do not feel like inventions. They feel like reality itself. And somewhere, in the quiet currents flowing through the planet, in the alternating rhythms of the machines that power our world, the ideas of Nikola Tesla are still at work. Not as legend, not as myth, but as the invisible foundation of the modern age. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe when you wake up. Sleep well. See you soon.